Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LFC Transfer Room live stream with myself, Paul, Hassan, and Carter. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this beautiful Friday evening. Hopefully, it's as good as it is wherever you are. Where I am at the moment, it's about 20 degrees outside, lovely, sunny, no clouds, perfect drinking weather, Carter. But we wouldn't know anything about that. But lots of news to get into today. We're slowly getting into the last weekend of Jurgen Klopp's tenure as a Liverpool manager. We'd all try not to shed a tear, but it probably can't be helped in many cases, I'm sure. A lot of interviews that went around today, a lot of talk about players leaving, players being the priority, some contract negotiations that are going on currently at the moment as well, and maybe some little bit of transfer news we've sprinkled in as well. But before we get into any of that, we just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. So if you are watching on YouTube or are watching on Twitter or X currently at the moment, make sure to jump over to our YouTube page and like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Make sure your notifications are on then as well for any future streams and videos too, so that you never miss out on any of our content. We're live every day from 7:30 p.m. UK time. And we have an American stream on every Tuesday night called Star Stripes and Anfield Nights. You can see it going across the bottom of the screen there. It's on every Tuesday evening at 9 p.m. Eastern time or 2 a.m. UK time. But without further ado, we'll get into it, because one of the biggest announcements that has been made today is that Arne Slot has announced that he will be the Liverpool manager next season. He doesn't need to wait for the clubs to announce it. He announced it himself. And that's the kind of balls we want on our new manager. Hassan, he's announced it. What we're going to look at is essentially what we could see in the future, how we think he'll attack next season, what formations he may set up in, and how he may go about it. We won't discuss any signings he might possibly make. We'll just look at it as if he takes this team. Now, hopefully we get signings, but we look at it as if he takes this team at September next season and goes into the new season with that. So are you happy with, first of all, I'll throw the question in two parts, really. So are you happy, first of all, with the announcement that he is going to be the new Liverpool manager? And how do you see us going into next season with current players only before we start getting into any other signings or anything like that? What formations do you think he'll do? Where do you think players will be? Is it going to be his 4-3-3? Is it going to be a 4-2-3-1? Tell me how you envision Liverpool entering next season before any signings come into play.
Yeah, with all the videos coming in, it's overwhelming to even think about the next step. But it's reality, it's how the world goes, and it's football. So I'm happy in a way that he is ready from the word go. As soon as the links came in, he was already like, I am in, I'm interested. He didn't play any games with his agent or anything. He was ready to go, and he was not shy or hiding anything and denying it. So, and he can't wait to start it. He announced it himself. It's a positive that he's very, I think, intelligent and ready to go. And for formation, uh, if we look at this season, the players we have, I think, and how the other teams are playing, I think it would be nice to see 4-2-3-1. Uh, but let's see when he comes in, how he analyzes the players already we have, and who he will try to bring in, if any. So uh, sad days, but we have to move on.
It's very much rip the band-aid off quickly and don't really care about it kind of an attitude. But it is that, like, we've known for a while, we've grieved, and I think now we have to be in the acceptance stage of grieving. Carter, I'll throw the same question to yourself. We know we've all said different signings. I've said I'd love to get a Florentino Luis. You've mentioned the likes of Anthony Gordon, much to the ire of many other people. I don't disagree with you on that one. I'm fine with that one. But at 100 million quid of what he's been quoted at, I'd completely refuse that. Your one that's out of the park completely was Marcus Rashford, but we'll save that for a different stream where we can have a good long chat about that. But Arne Slot coming in, how do you think he attacks the summer, the preseason, and how do you think he goes into next season before we even get any signings? And as well, are you happy with the appointment as well?
I'm very happy with the appointment at the moment. I think everything I've seen from him, like speaking to the fans, I think all the tactics videos that probably everyone's watched when you sort of just YouTube Arne Slot, I think there's a lot to be excited about. I think it'll be very interesting to see sort of what he covers, because obviously when you make the step to the Premier League, I think from what I understand, Ange made the change and went more of a man-to-man press. And Ange currently he sort of has like a bit of a shadow press. So I think it'll be interesting to see what changes Arne Slot makes. So moving forward, I think that will be very interesting, just tactically, because I think for everyone, obviously we played this very heavy metal football and Rodgers football. I was quite young. I was probably like, I actually honestly felt like so long ago. I was probably like 13, like 12 maybe. And it was more like, I felt like it was still very far up and down. So it'll be a very interesting change for everyone. And I think as long as we sort of give Slot the type of players that he needs, sort of as Paul's a big Vifer fan or Wifer. We need sort of players that are big, that can cover distances. So it'll be interesting to see who we sign, or if maybe we give one of my favourites, Curtis Jones or Stefan Bajcetic, a bit of a chance to showcase their skills. So I think it's very sad. Like my dad and brother have managed to get tickets for the last game. I'm still doing university work, but it will be very sad. But I think for everyone in the summer, it will be a very, very exciting summer, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. It's a weird time because you're I suppose the best way to look at it is don't be sad that it's over, be glad that it happened, and now we're kind of looking forward to it is the best way. And it is one of them. It's a bittersweet moment, realistically. Paul, I'll throw the same question to yourself for the third time. Is how do you see, before we get into any signings or anything like that of what we might think come in, how do you see Arne Slot sort of attacking next season? Does he go with a 4-3-3 like he's done most of this season? Does he go with a 4-2-3-1? Maybe push Trent up into midfield and let Connor Bradley in there at right back and be more solid defensively? I know you've mentioned that you like Joe Gomez either at the left back or the right back role, more so as a left back. And you've mentioned moving other players around as well. What do you think will be the direction that we go in the future? Will it be more heavy metal football again, like we've seen, or will it be more possession based? What would your ideal be?
One other thing about us football fans is that we tend to, teams that we want to get information on, we tend to pay a lot of attention. I knew very little about Feyenoord until a few months ago when Ange was linked to us. Since then, I've watched a ton of their games. I've watched dozens of YouTube videos. I've gone and searched for everything I can find about Arne Slot from a tactical standpoint. And one of the things that stand out to me, and my guess is that this is what put him over the edge versus Amorim, is that he is quite flexible. So he tends to set his formation depending on his opponents, and also he's not afraid to change his formation in the middle of a game depending on where the outcome is at the moment to finish the game. So how I see it, I'm not so sure if it's going to be a 4-2-3-1, but I can see why it might. Why I say I'm not too sure is depends on what he decides to do with Trent. If he decides to keep Trent as a right back, which is what I suspect, then based on how I seen him set up his team, I'm expecting him to use more Gomez on the left. So the double pivot would be similar to what Amorim does, with Joe Gomez staying back quite a bit more, and then you have Van Dijk in the middle and Kwanzaa on the right, and then you have Trent beside whoever is the six. The advantage with that is that you have that extra body in midfield. So with the 4-2-3-1, you have three people in midfield with this setup, which is basically the inverted right back. you have that additional player in midfield, and of course, if you lose the ball, either Trent or whoever is that six would drop back into the defense to flood that area. Now, going forward, I don't see the 4-2-3-1 again, because I'm not so sure if we are equipped to have that one striker, because I don't think he's going to trust Darwin to be the lone number 9. If Darwin is going to feature, I think he's going to feature on the left. So if Darwin is on the left and Salah is on the right, I'm not so sure if a 4-2-3-1 is the best option. But as I said, he's very flexible. So it can look like a 3 at the back with Trent inverting. It can switch to a 4-4-2 when we are defending, we're out of possession. So it's going to be interesting. The one thing I expect, though, is that we're going to have quite a bit more possession, and you will see less long passes. Because right now, there's a lot of long passes by Verge over the top. So bypassing the midfield. That is not the style that he plays. So I expect us to have a little bit more slow and methodical build-up when we are in possession. And I think we are going to be a little bit more solid at the back. So instead of having 3-3-1, 4-2, 5-1 results, don't be surprised if you have a lot more 1-0 or 2-0. So that's kind of how I see it. But as I said, he seems to be very flexible. And this is what I think gave him the job over Amorim, who was so rigid.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with first of all, the trust in Darwin. I think him being the lone striker actually gives him a little bit more freedom myself. It allows him to attack more from the left or more from the right rather than being purely central. And a lot of what Slot's sort of attacking philosophy is crosses and cutbacks into the 6-yard box, which could help Darwin and the opposite side winger who'd be cutting in and the number 10 bag a ton of goals too. So that's it. It could work that way too. I do get what you mean, though. I could see, but see, then you also have Cody Gakpo on the left, who seems to be performing very well there. We've questions, obviously, about Luis Diaz as well, whether or not he's going to be here or not. It seems to be leaning maybe he's not. Then also the questions around Mo Salah too, as well, if he stays or not, really. So there's a little bit up in the air with the front line. But I completely get where you're coming from with the lone striker.
The problem with Darwin as a lone striker, though, Stephen, is to be a lone striker, you need to be somebody who can hold a play and wait on your teammates to join you. I don't think that.
Would you think Cody be better than that? Would you think Cody be better up front there?
Or Jota. And of all of the forward players that we have, Darwin by far has the worst first touch. His first touch is horrendous. So, I think he's better off the left. But I guess we'd be surprised to know what a little bit of coaching can do. So I guess we'd have to wait and see.
Yeah, well, see, it's what he's done with Santiago Jimenez over in Feyenoord currently at the moment, I think, is what he might end up doing with Darwin. And he's just a big, strong physical presence that can command the ball in the midfield and or in the front line and kind of be the target man, so to speak. I think that's the way he might go with it. There's a question here, Paul, from another Paul. Why do you think asking why you said that yesterday evening that Curtis will be sold? Was that I'm assuming he's on about the stream yesterday with you were on with Damon. Why? So I'll give you a chance to explain yourself before Carter has an absolute conniption there in the corner.
Well, the point I was trying to make is we have an abundance of midfield talent. In my opinion, we have a lot of good midfielders, but we are short on world-class midfielders. So we have the numbers, but I'm not sure we have the quality. And I keep going back to our teams like Arsenal, Man City, because they are who we're competing against. They have probably less midfield talent, quantity than us, but their quality is way better. We don't have a De Bruyne. We don't have a Foden, we don't have a Bernardo, but we have good players. So I was saying that if we are going to go into the market for a top class midfielder or a world class number 6, then I could see a guy like Curtis being sold, because we're not going to sell Soboslai. We just got him. We're not going to sell Gavin Birch. I don't think we were going to move Endo. Maka is here to stay. So if we get a solid DM, another world class midfielder, you know, we just have to move one or two of the present midfielders that we have. So I see Curtis a very good player, but I don't see him as untouchable. The guy that is untouchable for me is Harvey Elliott.
Yeah, no, I agree. Carter, you obviously are one of Curtis Jones' biggest fans, and I'll allow you to rebuttal and state the case for Curtis Jones to not be sold going into the new season.
I think, as Paul said, we don't have Kevin De Bruyne, we don't have Bernardo Silva, but they have Kyle Walker and we have Trent. So I think Trent makes up for that. And people have disagreed with me, but I look at, and I've said personally for me, Jones starts over McAllister, and that's for a very specific reason, because I would rather carry the piano for Soboslai or Harvey Elliott than McAllister. And I think not everyone can be the flashy, especially if you have Trent. You need people to do the hard yards, who don't take risks on the ball, who are very good at pressing. Last year, I think Curtis, it was either one or the other way. Curtis Jones won the ball more in the final third than Ugarte, or Ugarte was the only player that won it more than Curtis Jones. And I think he's an elite presser. I think he's very secure on the ball. And some people say he dilly-daddles too much on the ball. I think that's not a bad thing. I think sometimes we're too gung-ho. I think sometimes you do need players who slow the game down and then speed it up. And I think he's really excellent at the third man runs. I think last season, when we did our late push, I think Curtis Jones was one of the most important reasons we were successful. I think him and Trent had a really good understanding. Curtis Jones was always sort of running in between the left winger and the striker. I think he's a really key player. And I think as well, he's homegrown. I think we need more players that carry the piano, in my opinion. I think I would rather, some people might disagree, I would rather build around Soboslai or Harvey Elliott as our 10 than McAllister. And I think until the number 6 improves, you need guys like Jones, because as I know you're a big fan of McAllister, but most dribble pass player at Liverpool in the last 8 years. And that's a very sort of look at the stats, pick something out. But I think until you have a number 6 that wins a lot of their challenges, that wins a lot of aerial duels, you need to make sure that the guy that supports him, which is currently McAllister, is also very good in the tackle, wins a lot of aerial duels, can cover space. If we had Declan Rice, I'd be like, yeah, McAllister makes sense. But when you have Endo, who wins about 30% of his tackles attempted on dribbles, I think you need more around him to support him. And I currently think I'd rather have McAllister at the 10 and Jones at the 8.
No, I get that. The only this is my contention with it, and I am the biggest stats guy you'll ever find in the world. The only reason that I hate that dribble by stat, and I get what you mean by it as well, that you'd want somebody that's a bit of a more muscular destroyer that's there beside somebody like McAllister, Elliott, your Messi-esque player, so to speak, that's your nimble, quick, small player that can do all the good bits. But Messi always had somebody beside him in the midfield that was able to cover from physically, like a destroyer. That's like you had your Mascherano, you had your Sergio Busquets, you had those kind of players that were big, strong physical presences. So I completely get that. But it's the dribble by stat is one stat that it boils my piss, because it's Jeremy Doku was the dribble by king earlier in the season. And the first game against Man City, he apparently dribbled by Trent like 14 times. And I watched that whole game and he went sideways about 11 of those times or went into the corner. It doesn't account for stuff like that. Different when it's in the center of the midfield. And I get that because it opens passing lanes left and right and whatnot. I completely understand that. But I think that stat needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. But I think it's an interesting one, because I think Curtis Jones, Luis Diaz, and maybe one or two others might be on the cusp. I think, to be honest, Curtis Jones and Luis Diaz are probably the two that are on the cusp of maybe not being the odd men out. And that's not out of a lack of quality. I just think that depending on the formation, if we played a 4-2-3-1, I think a rotation of Curtis Jones, Dominic Szoboszlai, and Harvey Elliott in the 10 position would be absolutely nuts, because Jones is a 10 by trade and a left winger by trade. So him playing in a midfield is kind of like Szoboszlai playing in a midfield. It's not him, so to speak. It's like 80% of him. And as Klopp has said many times, if Jones can press, anyone can press. Hassan, we've left you out for a little bit, but we're going to throw this question at you now from John. What would you consider a good first season under Arne Slot next season? And I'll give my option on it as well, and I'll throw it to the two lads. But we'll throw it to yourself first. What would you consider a good season under Arne Slot next season?
Yeah, to be honest, I want to make it clear that Klopp leaving is scaring me to death. But now, what can we do? I think if we see it in conservative way, that top four and one or trophy. But the thing I want to see is that he's ready to compete. He gives games to these the two teams who will be challenging. I think if we are like there's with them competing them till the end and missing out, it's okay. But if there's a large gap and things are not going right, uh, and players are not understanding, that would be a disaster. But a good season will be we competing with the top teams, giving them hard games, winning them at home, and third or fourth would be a really good season for a new coach coming in.
Yeah, trophies wise, though, do you think maybe Carabao Cup, FA Cup, a deep run in the Champions League? Do you foresee us doing the impossible? I say impossible; it's not impossible, but would you see us winning the Premier League next season?
My heart says, but it depends how he comes in, how he gels in the team and the culture, everything. It will show, I think, in the first 10 games where we stand. Uh, um, Hopefully, if he goes like in Klopp first season, we were in Europa, we played the final till halftime, we were winning, and after halftime, I don't know what happened. Uh, that showed us that he's ready. He can build the team even with these players which were not his. He identified and gradually players coming in, and that is what I want to see. That he comes in, he integrates his philosophy, and the players who are working for him, he identifies that they will be in his future, and those which he thinks will not be, he plays them to their max, and maybe he can shift them in the another in the next break, and bring in the players he really wants. That is what I want. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Fair enough. I, for me myself, I think a Champions League place finish, coupled with at least an FA Cup or a Carabao Cup, and a deep run in the Champions League as well, would be ideal. But realistically, for myself, is if we can reduce our goals conceded and keep our goals scored somewhat around the same level, we finish very high in the Premier League next season. If you look at the statistics of it, of goals conceded compared to goals scored, City were just ahead of us in goals scored, but around the same in goals conceded. Arsenal were way less in goals conceded, but also way less in goals scored. Hilariously, it's the reason that their goal difference is so big is because they conceded so little. If you look at the amount of goals scored, they're less than both us and City. If we just conceded, I think I looked at the numbers myself. If we conceded 0.5 goals per 90 less throughout the season, which is essentially, how many games did we play this season? About 50 something like that, which is essentially concede 20 to 25 less goals in the season. We win the Premier League, we probably win the Europa League, and we probably get through in the FA Cup and probably win that as well. We could we could have gone on and got a quadruple if it's just half a goal less per 90, which is mad. Carter, I'll throw the same question over to you. What would you consider as a successful season for Arne Slot next season?
As you kind of said, genuinely success for me is conceding less than 30 goals in the league, because I think no matter what, I think the attack will be fine, but I think the biggest thing for us is improving defensively. Like, if we get about, I think 20 is very ambitious as 20 goals conceded, but I think if we get around 20 to 25 goals conceded in the league, I think we will be challenging. Like, I think for us, I'm big, massive fan of Klopp. I think there's lots of easy wins for Arne. And I think the biggest one is just not conceding. And I think if you, like this season, if we'd have conceded 25 goals, we'd have won the league. And I think Arsenal are very good at that. I think we've got a bit more people who can express themselves maybe in the front line. Like, I think I'm a big fan of Havertz. I think Trossard's been very impressive. He's kind of like their Jota. But I think we have a lot more guys who can win us games than they do. I think we have Szoboszlai, we have Elliott, we have Salah, we have Nunes, we have Gakpo, we have Diaz. But defensively, it's just too much every single time. And I think for Slot, I think genuinely the only thing, like, the attack might get a little bit worse, but I think just improving defensively could jump us up to 85 points. Like, I think anywhere 80 plus points and under sort of 28 goals conceded would be a real success.
Yeah, I don't disagree. That's the way that I look at it. If we conceded less goals, we would have won an awful lot more trophies. Paul, same question to yourself in that is, what would you consider a successful season next year under Slot?
Call me mad, but I think we have a chance to win the league. I'm not going to bet on it, but I think we have a chance to win the league. Because you are a guy that followed the stats, Stephen. I was looking at some earlier this week, and there are a couple of reasons Arsenal is where they are and where we are. Arsenal had 18 clean sheets. We had 9. That's twice the amount that we have. Man City and Everton has 13. So Everton, who has way less talent than Liverpool, had 13 clean sheets, and we had 9. So there's your problem. So the first thing that Arne needs to sort out is the defense. Now, another thing too that prevented us from winning the league this year, and it's not really Darwin Núñez as most people seem to think. We were incredibly unfortunate with injuries. And again, if you look at Arsenal, William Saliba and Gabriel, they played almost every minute of the Premier League, as well as Ben White, the right back, and their goalkeeper. Our goalkeeper, Alisson, the best in the world, but we were unfortunate enough to have him missing for a chunk of the games. And even though Kelleher was really good, there's a difference between Kelleher, the backup, and Alisson. Also, with Matip and Van Dijk fit for the entire season, is just as good, if not better, than Saliba and Gabriel. So we were very, very unfortunate with the injuries. If you go into midfield, Rice and their captain Odegaard, they were available for almost every game, whilst we were struggling with Trent, our best player. He was out for about 10 to 12 games in the middle of the season. So we can go on. And when we entered the season, we were expecting a big season from Stefan Bajcetic and Carter's favorite, Thiago. both of them combined gave us about 30 minutes of Premier League football, right? So if we can avoid those catastrophic injuries next year, we don't need to improve that much to be up there with the best. But even despite all of those injuries, if Luis Diaz had finished one of those chances that against Man City at Anfield, if Trent had finished that 4 versus 2 against Arsenal at Anfield, not only would we be getting 3 points instead of 1, but we'll be taking points away from our rivals. Now, when you want to win the league, the games against people like Man City and Arsenal, who we are competing with, those games are even more critical compared to the games against mid-table teams. So, despite all the misses that Darwin and Salah on the front line had, just those small little differences in the next season, even if you forget about any addition that we'll make in the transfer market, we are not 100 miles away from City or Arsenal. So I would be very disappointed if we finish anywhere worse than what we did this year, which is third place and a cup. Yes, it'll be more difficult because we have Champions League football right now this year. But I think with a couple of signings and some good luck on the injury front, I don't think Arne needs to be a magician for us to be where we want to be. Because we are not changing manager because our team sucks. We are changing manager because our manager decided that he wants a break. So our team is really, really good. We just need just that little bit of luck and 1 or 2 key signings, and we are right there. So I am very optimistic about the next season.
Yeah, and to hammer home this point, I'm going to share this because as you were talking about it there, I pulled it up, seeing as we're all into our stats here. So I'm going to just fix this here now, get rid of this brand. So if you look at this here, this alone, so I'll zoom in on it a little bit and scroll down. So on our y-axis here, we have goals conceded per 90, and on our x-axis here, if my remembrance of my school maths is right, that's how you do these charts. Your x-axis here is goals scored per 90. You can see here in the Premier League, and that actually across all top 7 leagues, Liverpool are in a very high tier. It's just the only difference that was had, and hilariously, if anybody spotted that, I'll try and get my mouse back over it again. That's where Feyenoord were. Now, Dutch League, I get that, and it's all interesting with that. Liverpool are here, just behind Man City and how many goals scored. 2.52 goals scored per 90, 0.94 goals conceded per 90. Liverpool, 2.45, 1.09 conceded. And then you go and you take a look at Arsenal, 2.18 and 0.82. If we dropped that by 0.4 if we drop that by 0.4 of a goal less per 90, all of a sudden Liverpool are winning the league because we'd all of a sudden land down here. And hilariously, if you take a look at who has the best defensive in the league, in all of Europe, it's Inter Milan with Inzaghi, which is one of my touts for hopefully being a manager. So just even to hammer that point home of how fine the margin was, because we could clearly see that we were very, very close to Man City. And obviously, we are even closer to Arsenal. It's very fine margins. Very, very, very fine margins. But in saying that, I'm going to stop sharing that screen now. We're going to jump back in here and we're going to get this brand up again. And there we go. And we're looking all pretty again. Isn't that fantastic? So it is one of them. Like, Paul, to your point as well, it's interesting that, like, if the referees were done correct at Spurs, if the referees were done correct at Arsenal, and also if the referees were done correct at City, we would have had a penalty against Arsenal that could have changed the game. We would have had a very last second penalty against City that could have very easily changed the game. And we would have been a goal up with 10 men against Spurs and completely changed that game as well. There's a 9-point swing as well. Similarly to your 6-point swing that you were speaking about with Diaz with his finishing against City and obviously Trent not hitting the bar against Arsenal as well. And that finish too. Completely understand that. But there are fine margins, and I think you're correct in saying that anything less than third and an equal points finish than what we finish on this season. If we get less than what we did this season, considering the team is relatively going to be the same, I'd consider it a bit of a disappointment myself. But before we get on to the next topic, just want to ask everybody to make sure you like and subscribe if you're watching over on Twitter or X, as it's known as now. Please jump over to our YouTube channel and like and subscribe there if you can, please. It's free compared to some other Liverpool channels, and you don't have to worry about any paywalls or anything like that. So nothing to worry about there at all. Don't worry about that, guys. We're not talking about anybody in particular, but there's no paywalls, so nothing to worry about there. But it is interesting because, speaking on the defensive side of things, Fabrizio Romano came out and said that centre-back is going to be a key role. And we're losing 2 players already to free agency in Carter's love child in Thiago Alcantara. And then we have, as you mentioned, Paul, possibly one of the best centre-backs on his day that we got in a free transfer in Joel Matip. So it stands to reason that we're obviously going to need to replace those players. Maybe not Thiago. I think we have replacements in place for that as it is. Carter, I know you love him, but availability is the best ability. And you say that his skill is undoubtedly unmatched. It is, but if you're never on the pitch to show it, you can't really do anything with it. And that's more my crux of it. If he stayed fit, I would be in that camp with you, dying on that hill, saying he's the best midfielder in the world and the best midfielder in our team, without question. But if you can't get on the pitch to do it, I can't really help you. That's just, and I get it. I know where you're coming from, and I completely sympathise with you having suffered through not being able to see him in a Liverpool jersey, because there has been games, that United game that he played, masterclass, just played all 11 United players off the pitch. No questions. The goal against Porto, unquestionable technique to just slice it with the side of his foot and just watch it curl into the corner. Beautiful play. Joel Matip with his runs as well. It's just it's going to be sad to see the 2 of them go, but it's just injuries, and unfortunately time is up for Matip, I'm afraid, at this stage. But centre-back is going to be a position of importance, Fabrizio Romano reported. And William Pacho, who plays for Eintracht Frankfurt at the moment, is one of our main targets. But he did say that we have a list of targets. So what we'll do is everybody in the chat as well, and if you're on Twitter, tweet below this, or you can come over and jump onto YouTube as well and get your thoughts into the chat too. But I'll start with yourself, Paul, because myself and yourself have gone back an awful lot over the centre-back roles. And the question that I'll pose to both you and the chat is, centre-backs that we've been linked with so far, we've Lenny Yoro, we've Gonzalo Inacio, we've Piero Hincapié, and now we have William Pacho as well, and then we have Levi Colwill. Of those 5, give me your ranking 1st to 5th in how you'd approach them priority-wise to a transfer. And everybody in the chat do the same thing as well.
I will have Euro at number 5, primarily because, one, I think he's like 18. He's right-footed, and he's going to cost. He's probably the most expensive of the bunch. I don't see him coming in at that expensive price and be a full-time starter like for the first year. So I would have him down there. My number 1 would be Inacio, because yes, the Portuguese league is not as strong as the Bundesliga, but he has played a ton of games, and he's very experienced. Plus, he has also represented Portugal on a number. I think he's Portugal number 1 player, number 1 starter on that left side. So with his experience and his ability to not only defend, but to contribute to the attack, he would be my number 1. Closely followed by Pacho, William Pacho. I think it's William, right? Not William. William Pacho. I like him. I didn't know much about him until a few months ago, I must admit. But his profile is what we're looking for. He's tall, physical, he's quick, and he's young. And he's playing very well in his team right now. Outside of that, those 2, I don't really care much. I don't rate Hincapié that much. So give me Inacio or Pacho, either, and I'm good, because I want a centre back that can cover on the left side in terms of a left-footed left back. If we need to play Verge and play that centre back as a left back. So give me Inacio or Pacho. Anybody else, it doesn't really matter. It's a big drop off. I know Carter will have a few more because he's a little bit more into that than I do. But give me Pacho or Inacio, rock, paper, scissors. Lenny Yoro, not for that price. No.
That's fair. I think Lenny Euro is probably one of the best prospects in Europe currently at the moment myself, but I understand with the price, and I had arguments earlier on in the chat about it as well. Like, if a club is selling for X price and we can only afford Y price, there's no point in us even entertaining it, and that's the hill I'll die on as well. Carter, of those centre backs that I mentioned Gonzalo Inacio, Lenny Euro, Piero Hincapié, Levi Colwill, and William Pacho with Frankfurt as well. Of those 5, how would you rank them in priority? And if you have any curveballs that you want to throw in there, by all means, please do as well.
I'm not trying to be argumentative against Paul or yourself, but I'm going to put Inacio at 5. I know people that watch Sporting Lisbon games like Portuguese, and they say very good on the ball, off the ball. I know some of the stats look good, but I think they actually say like eye test wise. Like I think when I said to one of them, Ezri Konsa was available to play for Portugal, they were like, yeah, we need him. We need people that can defend. And I think that says a lot. And I think for me, I get what Paul means with Lenny Euro, but I think, and this could come back to bite me, but I think when you're looking at almost the Mbappe of centre halves, when you're looking at Lenny Euro, I think anywhere up to 70, 75, 80, I'd be happy with, even if he doesn't necessarily start. I think the fact that his numbers are that good at 18, that like I haven't watched the games, I've seen the compilations of him against PSG, looks really, really impressive, sort of stands out in the aerial duels, in the tackles, in the passing percentage. I think I'd have him at 1 or 2, probably interchanging with Levi Colwill. I think it's not ridiculous to say you could move Van Dijk to right centre half. I know with Trent it would ask him to do a lot more, but I think Levi Colwill, I've seen at Brighton personally. I think he looked unbelievable as a left centre back. I think he's the type of centre back you want when you're playing your Real Madrids, when you're playing your Man Cities, type of players who are unfazed on the ball, who are ready for anything. But I think, and this is a bit of a curveball, as you said, I think Scalvini at Atalanta, I think he could maybe play 6. I think he sort of, from what I understand, he plays a bit of a libero role where sort of like Koeman did at Ajax, where he steps into midfield. I think he could play centre half. He could play number 6. I think stats wise, maybe not this year. I haven't checked him out this year, but last year, I think a lot of his sort of on the ball statistics were very strong. And I think someone like him who could sort of cover 2 positions. He's a big lad. He's very good on the ball. I think those type of guys, I'd be interested. I think for me, Inacio is a bit too Laporte. Like a bit too much like Laporte, where very, very good on the ball. But whenever we played Man City, I just thought, Salah, just go at him. I think we can't. If we've got Trent, I don't think you can have anyone else who you're a bit like, oh, you can go at them. So I think, I'd say like Colwill and Lenny Euro, and then maybe Scalvini, and then Pacho, and then maybe Inacio.
Yeah, no, I'm don't disagree with you on that. I think Inacio maybe struggles a little bit in both his duels, which is what you'd really want a defender to do. So I'm going to pull up here some people that were linked with essentially, and it's interesting where you'll see people land. So I'm going to do all ages, and we're going to have a look here. So essentially, what you'd want your defender to do is you'd want your defender to win in the air and win on the ground. So defensive duels percentage 1 and aerial duels percentage 1 is what you'd want. So if you take a look at this that I'm going to share now, this is across all top 7 leagues. And I see Justin is there has mentioned somebody that I would have thrown in as a curveball as well. So across all top 7 leagues, and we're going to take away the brand here again now so we can all have a look at it. And I'll zoom in, Carter, because I know you're on your phone. So bottom line is your aerial duels 1, top line is your defensive duels 1. Essentially, we want to be looking up here. So these would be the type of players that you'd want. So you have your Van Dijk's, unicorn of a player, and then you have your Lenny Euros, your Ibrahima Konates, Diomande, who plays for Sporting alongside Inacio, which is why I think he's the better option. And then we also have our own little Jarell Kwanzaa here. Antonio Silva, who plays for Benfica, is another option that could be there, but there's plenty of different players that are around here currently at the moment that are very high, like defensive dual percentage wins. Like Calvin Bassey up here is absolutely nuts, which is hilarious to see. And then you have loads of other players that are here as well. Kim Min-jae you have here. You have Harry Maguire is up this area somewhere. And then you have others that are down here that are just completely useless, like Eric Dyer. we won't mention that. But it is interesting to say, this is why, Paul, we would have said Lenny Euro being somebody that could turn into an absolute monster, which is why we would be okay with certain concessions made towards a signing. Now, will we be able to afford it? Completely different situation. Will we want to do it? Completely different situation. I think somebody of the Diamande or Antonio Silva will be the kind of player that we go for. I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'll go to Hassan on this, the same thing as well. Hassan, of those centre backs we mentioned, we obviously had Diamande, we had Levi Colwill, we had others as well mentioned there. Who would have been your top five? Like, we obviously seen here as well that we have Mark Gahey, who plays for Crystal Palace, and Tomori as well. There's a lot of them that realistically, there's Bastoni as well. If that is it, Bastoni or Barella? Barella's the midfielder that plays over in Italy. Bastoni's the centre back. But as Carter very astutely pointed out, back five tax. So there is that as well that comes along with that with Bastoni. So who do you see as possibly the top five, and where would you rank them in relation to how we should approach them for our signings?
Yeah, the most players we are linked with were before Edwards coming in. I think he might have his own list, and I think it depends upon how much they rate now. Konsa and Konate going in. I think they won't be able like to move him along. I think the price in which we got him, I think his ceiling is higher than that. Just his injury record is a bit shaky. I won't be surprised if he goes for someone like Tosin, who is on free transfer. Uh, I think it will depend upon them figuring out how much that player will play, the pay we will be able to give him, and his like Lenny Euro. I think he has world class potential, but I don't think he will be looking for a move where he will have to fight for starting 11. I think we will go for someone safe like Matip coming in. We Klopp knew him from Bundesliga that he's really good, and he will come for free. So I think it will be after the last game. Picture will start becoming clear.
Yeah, it will. And what's interesting as well, Carter, the centre back that you mentioned from Italy that plays for Atalanta, Richard Hughes, our new sporting director, loves Italian football. So it wouldn't even it wouldn't even be out of the ordinary that if we did go for somebody like that, a little bit out of the blue from the Italian league, like Richard Hughes loves Italian.
What's his name? What's that name?
What's his name, Carter? From
Scalavini.
Okay.
Scalavini.
He's like 20.
Scalavini.
He's definitely below like 22, 23. I think
Yeah.
he's played a little bit. He didn't play against us because he was injured, but he's sort of been touted as the next sort of main center of a centre back free sort of player, sort of coming out of Italy. Yeah, left-footed. So, but I've seen online like a lot of people said he could maybe, because of the way he plays for Atalanta, he could make the step to being in defensive midfield as well, because he's quite a big lad. He's very good on the ball. He sort of steps into midfield a lot. He's sort of, maybe FSG wouldn't make that jump, but he's also one you could think of. He could play two positions almost. So he's one why I think as well, as you said, like Richard Hughes, I think he was around Atalanta. He's a big fan of De Zerbi. Like, he's very into his Italian football. So I definitely think he's one that we could be looking at. But I almost think the price, as Paul said with Lenny Euro, I think the price could almost rule us out a bit, because they might look at him as Højlund was 60, 70. Well, he's their main centre-back, so he could be 60, 70. So I think that's the only thing that could like prevent us from maybe making a move for him.
Can we get Bastoni? He's the best in Italy, I think.
It'd be hard considering Inter have just won the league and he might want to stay and play Champions League football there. It'd be hard to get him. It'd be hard pressed because Italian players don't necessarily like to leave Italy. It's a weird one. It's kind of like the Basque players in for like Bilbao. Like they only take in it's a strange one. Italians are a weird people. I love them to death, but it is an interesting one. I'd love to get him. I think he's fantastic, but I don't know if we'd go that far because he'd demand a big fee. And I think we'd end up going for somebody like not a tier lower, so to speak, but a team tier lower that'd be willing to accept a lesser fee for a similar profile of a player. As Carter mentioned the Atalanta centre back. So it'd be that as well. Before we move on to our last topic of today, before we finish up, it'll be a very quick and brief discussion of a player that we'd be hoping maybe to get on the cheap as we speak of it. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and make sure that you have all of your notifications on so that you never miss out on any streams or videos. And if you're currently watching on Twitter or X, please make sure to jump over to the YouTube channel, like and subscribe there so that you never miss out, and throw on your notification bell. Live every day from 7:30 UK time, and we're live every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 2 a.m. UK time if you're a night owl a bit like myself, to stick around and watch for Star Stripes and Anfield Lights in our American stream with our American friends. But the last topic that we're going to get into is last season. It was nearly all but done, and I say all but done because there was apparently it stopped at contract talks with Kefren Thuram, the centre midfielder for OCG Nice, hilariously also owned by Ineos, who own now City, or not City, could never afford that, United as well. He is now entering the last year of his contract. Last year was quoted at about £34 million and was asking for £150,000 a week in wages, which is where we kind of drew the line at that. If the reason we drew the line at that is because he's currently on 15k a week at Nice at the moment. So that much of a jump is massive, and I don't think we were willing to give him that. Maybe I think we were handing him 60, 70, and he was just saying no, I wanted that tripled nearly. And I think that may be down to his agent, maybe down to his dad as well, who operates in those things. But it's been reported now from very reliable sources that come out of Nice, that report on Nice News, that he could be available for as little as £13 million. Bargain. You'd find him in the bargain bin in the shop. But £13 million, and due to that, it could be an awful lot less of a wage. And just to address Paul's question here, is it safe to say we won't be buying anyone from the Prem? Possibly not safe to say that. We may end up going for somebody that would be from a Prem to Prem team. The only reason that I would not say that's maybe less likely is because that's our direct competition, and it's very rare you find teams selling to their direct competition. Obviously, we had this season, we've seen the likes of Cole Palmer go from City to Chelsea. That was because he wasn't getting game time. Kai Havertz had to get off the books at Chelsea as well. You then had Gabriel Jesus, who went from City to Arsenal, and there is stuff that happens, but I just don't think the players that you want to throw a lot of money at, I don't think will be coming from a Prem to Prem team. The only one I think may go will be Bruno Guimaraes, but that's only because his release clause is there, and his release clause ends 15 days after the transfer window opens on June 14th, to answer your question, Paul. But Kefren Thuram, Paul, you said that I think it was you that said it. I can't remember, but correct me if I'm wrong. You weren't necessarily too impressed by him, and you feel that drop of an amount doesn't necessarily instill you with confidence in what the player can do. I sort of rebutted with that a couple of days ago, that he's played a lot of his games both at centre mid and then as a double pivot and as a CDM as well, and that for that little of a price, it is worth the risk. If he doesn't pan out, you could loan him out a couple of years and then end up getting the same value back for him. If it does work out, you've just gotten a gem for less than 20 million euro. So given that logic, would you still be of the same opinion that much of a drop off in price does not instill you with confidence of a signing?
Not really. It doesn't really instill with a lot of confidence, because where would he fit? We have enough players who can play a little bit of 8, can play a little 10, can play a little 6. We have enough of those players. Curtis Jones is a player like that, right? So when we were after Kefren Thuram, That was before we had Soboslai, before we had Gravenberch, before we had Endo, right? And at that point, he was widely touted as the next great big thing. I don't know if it's because of his last name, but he was highly touted a year or so ago, 12 to 18 months ago. So much so that I, like most of us here, we watch the under 21s because we don't get to watch OGC Nice game here. And because I thought he was going to come to Liverpool. I watched every minute that he played for the under 21s last year. And to be honest, he was okay, but I did not see anything that said, yes, this guy is a star. So he really didn't impress me that much. And apparently he hasn't really progressed in his career since then because one, he can't go anywhere near the French national team. And secondly, if he's that inexpensive, and there's so many teams right now looking for top class midfielders, including Manchester United, why is no buzz around him? So I guess if it's dirt cheap and he will take like 50K a week, then why not take a punt? But we have more important positions that needs to be addressed. And he doesn't strike me. We need a number 6. He has that big physical frame. He's like 6'3", 6'4". He has that long hair that you like to see. You know, he looks the part. But I don't think his game is the part. So I am not too excited about him.
Yeah.
I know Carter will want him, but nothing special. If we get him, I'm cool. If not, I'm cool.
Yeah. It's something that you wouldn't lose sleep over if we didn't get him. But it's the reason I think it'd be a great bargain of a signing. And Carter, I'll throw it over to yourself now in a minute before we go to Hassan to finish ourselves off. But as I said, I think if we go £13 million, 75 grand a week, you're already getting rid of 20 million a year in salary with Adrian, Matip, and Thiago going. So with those alone, you have 20 million there to spend every year on salary. So easily at 75 grand a week isn't going to make a dent into that. So Carter, would you be of a similar opinion of myself? Punt it, get him. If it doesn't work out, you can loan him a couple of years to different places and then end up selling him for the same price that you bought him. It's very, very little risk, I feel, and a lot of reward possible out of it. Would you be a betting man and put some money on that?
I think, for me personally, honestly, last season, even if it was for 45, 50 million, I would have signed him over Gravenberch. I think he might not have the ceiling, but I think intensity-wise, I think he's a lot more, he would have fit a lot more. But I now think guys who I personally think are more suited to sort of the left 8. You have McAllister, you have Gravenberch, you have Jones, you have Soboslai. I think that's just too many players. I think we need someone else. And I do understand what you mean in terms of like that he's very cheap. And maybe from that way, I could understand it. But for me, I look at the young Stefan Bajcetic, and I do think like he's Frankie de Jong at home. Like, I just look at him and go, I wouldn't want to block any chance of him playing fit. And I would definitely say I'd take Curtis Jones over him, over Gravenberch, over Alexis McAllister, because none of them are best friends with Anthony Gordon and are going to get him to come to Liverpool. But I'm not joking. But yeah, I just think with Bajcetic, I think Jones stays homegrown. It's easy. He wants to be a part of a club. And I think it's a lot easier to keep someone like Jones than Thuram or McAllister or Gravenberch if they're not playing. And I also think with, as I said, Bajcetic, I think you've got such a talented player. As Paul said, Man United with Kobe Mainoo, I think the issue with them signing Thuram is they do the same thing and they're both young players. And it's almost like you can't sign someone because Kobe Mainoo needs to start all these games now. So it's it's very difficult for United and us in a sense, because if you sign him, it's like, how do you fit him in? Are you going to play him out of position like you've played all these other guys out of position, or are you going to play people in a place to succeed? So I think it's almost a year too late. If it was this summer, and I know you guys probably think McAllister, I think he's been very good. But if I'd have said to you right now, last summer, you can sign Thuram for 13 million, or McAllister for 35, rising to 55, Gravenberch for 40, Endo for 19, you'd have snapped my hand off and said, I'll take Thuram every day of the week. But it's timing, isn't it? It's like Fekir missed his time. Timings have just gone by. I just think it's very unlucky for him. Very talented player, but I think the Liverpool boat's just glided by.
Yeah, and it seems to be that case for an awful lot of people over the past 12 months that the Liverpool boat has gone by, as Paul mentions here as well, with Andre as well. That just seemed to fizzle out completely. I think, as you mentioned, we wanted to spend money on him. All of a sudden, he turned around and said, no, I'm staying. We were like, cool, went and got Gravenberch, and then that was that boat sailed. Hassan, similar question to yourself. Is it 13 million? Is it worth the punt, or is it too many cooks in the kitchen at that point if we did go and get him?
For 13 million, I think it's a good price. I think with failed move last summer, maybe his heart was not really in it. He was looking for new challenges. His brother went to Inter and he has played really well and scored really, really important goals for them. It cannot hurt. The only thing, as Carter and Paul mentioned, that we have many players at that similar position. If as mentioned, if Curtis going, then I think there's some place for him. But I don't think who would buy Curtis homegrown talent for the money we would want for him. So I think it will only depend if someone is moving on. But 13 million could not hurt, as you said, that we can loan him if he's not there. But he's a player with high ceiling, with his height, stature, and his football legacy.
Yeah, I think he is a player that has a high ceiling, and I think, as Carter mentioned, a year too late. He should have moved last season and just taken maybe a cheaper deal and sort of swallowed his pride a little bit. And I think he would have been absolutely on a world-class stage. Now, if he went to a team, if he came to us, I think he would have been sat in the same situation as Alexi McAllister. I don't think we would have went and gotten Szoboszlai if he said yes. I think we would have both been happy with McAllister and Thuram, and I think we would have gone and gotten somebody else for that DM role. Hilarious the amount of things that could have happened, but we're going to leave it there, guys. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We've had over 2,500 people in this watching us, and that is absolutely fantastic. Just one last thing before we go. If you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe. Have your notifications on so that you never miss out on videos. And if you're currently watching on Twitter or X currently at the moment, make sure to jump over to our YouTube channel. The link is in the bio. And we're live every day from 7:30 p.m. UK time, and we have every Tuesday we have a Star Stripes and Anfield Nights American stream for our friends across the pond at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or it's 2 a.m. UK time if you're a bit of a night owl like myself. Thank you guys so much for joining us. For myself, Paul, Hassan, and Carter, it's been very much appreciated. Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend and nobody sheds any tears over the weekend with Klopp's last game, because I know I will cry like a bitch. Thank you guys so much, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day.